There are allegations that emails critical to the Liberal gas plant cancellations were deleted at Queen's Park. An OPP investigation has been launched. If true, what of value, if anything, did those emails contain? And what can we as citizens reasonably expect to know about these and other government dealings? Joining us now to help answer that from the nation's capital, Michael Geist. He's Canada Research Chair of Internet and E-commerce Law at the University of Ottawa. In following up to the story that we just heard coming out of the United States, we see what kind of surveillance we now know, clearly what kind of surveillance is in place in the United States. Do we have similar goings-on in Canada?
Well, there's every reason to believe that there are some similar goings-on, although perhaps not on the scale that you see in the United States, both in terms of just the sheer breadth of the program, nor necessarily the involvement of some of the internet companies. But what we do know is that our security agencies are collecting what's known as metadata on cell phone calls, so the kind of information that Christopher Segoyan was talking about, call length, who you're speaking to, geographic information is collected. We know that it's a program that has raised concerns in the past, that elements of that program may have been stopped in response to those concerns, but then that program has been restarted or was restarted by the Defense Minister, Peter MacKay. But so much of this is shrouded in secrecy. What is released is invariably redacted so heavily that you're forced to really try to read between the lines in order to have any kind of assurance that this is a program that meets the kind of privacy expectations that I think most Canadians expect.
We've got 21st century surveillance technology right now, and we got 20th century laws on the books. How much of this whole issue is summed up in that last sentence I just said?
I think it's a big issue. It's subject of a piece that's out that I wrote over the weekend, where if you take a look at where we previously tried to set some limitations, in addition to the oversight that we've been talking about, it envisions a world that is simply far different from the one that we have today. So if you think, for example, around the issue of content, and we tried to create a barrier, in a sense, around actually listening into a conversation, as opposed to the other bits of information, that so-called metadata, that is included as part of a conversation. And the idea was content, very sensitive, you need real oversight, you need a warrant for that. The metadata, somehow less sensitive, doesn't say as much. Now, 10, 15 years ago, before we had the kind of data mining capabilities that exist today, that might have been true. But in the current environment today, when, as we heard earlier, you can collect all this calling information on 300 million Americans, or 35 million Canadians, I suppose, suddenly that metadata starts telling an enormous story. In fact, we've had a number of studies that suggest in some ways it tells a more detailed story, a more compelling story than the content itself. Same is true on the geographic side. This notion that we will conduct surveillance of foreign communications, but we won't do it on a domestic level, may also have worked at some point in time a decade or more ago. In the current environment, with largely a common communications infrastructure, one in which so much is shared, so much is placed in the cloud, delineating on that basis between domestic and foreign simply doesn't work anymore. And so the laws are really outdated, at least in terms of some of the kinds of boundaries that they're seeking to set, not to mention the problems that we have, the real shortcomings that exist on the oversight side.
I'm